Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I've never seen such a high-powered audience in all my life, so we'll prepare ourselves and gird our loins. This is a meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Ian Wingfield. I'm the chair of the committee, but before we start the meeting, I just have a few housekeeping announcements to make. There are no planned fire alarm tests this evening, so if you hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is St John's Churchyard, just off Druid Street there. Council staff will be available to direct you. The public toilets are located in the main reception area. Please switch off your mobile phones to silent whilst in the meeting. The meeting is being live streamed to the Southwark Council YouTube channel, and the recording of the meeting will also be viewable on YouTube once the meeting has concluded. May I remind members to raise your hand if you wish to speak, and please wait until I have given you permission to speak before contributing. Furthermore, when the chair speaks, other members should stop speaking and not interrupt the chair. Members can ask any questions on the issue under discussion and move recommendations on that issue. Please could members and officers also ensure that they keep their microphone close and speak directly into it. We've had a few issues before at previous meetings with sound levels. So members of the public are welcome to record, screenshot or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. A copy of the council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on the council's website. So we'll move to the formal agenda. First item is apologies. I have received apologies from Councillor Cassandra Brown, Councillor Victor Chamberlain, Councillor Esme Hicks, and I think Councillor Richard Leeming will also not be in attendance. I know we have a couple of substitutes, but I'll introduce them as we go along. Are there any other apologies anybody's got notice of? No? Okay, thank you. So I'll just move to confirming who the voting members are at the meeting. Obviously, I've introduced myself, and I'll just go around the table. Councillor Von Wiese.
Irina Von Wiese, Born Bankside Councillor and Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Councillor Rachel Bentley, substituting for Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to see you. Councillor Johnson.
Councillor Laura Johnson, Chaucer Ward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Abacha.
Councillor Susan Abacha, Camberwell Green.
Councillor Seaton.
Councillor Martin Seaton, North Walls Ward.
See, I didn't leave you to last this time, did I? I've been cut off. Councillor Ottery.
Councillor Jason Ottery, St Giles Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Councillor Bethan Roberts, Rotherhithe.
Thank you. And Councillor Rose.
Good evening, Chair. I'm Councillor Catherine Rose, Dulwich Wood Ward, and deputising for Councillor Cassandra Brown.
Thank you very much. I move on to item 2, which is notification of any items of business which the chair deems urgent. There's no additional late items. You should have all received the supplemental agenda number 1. And the main item on the agenda is under item 5. So you should have had the main report as well. Everybody got the papers? Yes, thank you very much. Right. Item 3, disclosure of interests and dispensations. Has anybody got any interests or dispensations to declare at this point? No? Thank you all. 4 minutes. Can we approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of October 2025? Thank you very much. Right, item 5, which is a call-in, a request in relation to the Asylum Road Care Home. The item is detailed on pages 12 to 75 of the report, and we will hear from, firstly, the head of scrutiny, Everton Roberts, then from the councillors who requested the call-in, and then from cabinet members and officers. So that's the way we intend to proceed. So can I first of all call upon the head of scrutiny to come forward and outline the call-in process. I'm very grateful for Everton to do this because, you know, he's not usually the star of the proceedings. But I think that as we haven't had a call in for a little while, and also because of the thousands of people that are watching us on YouTube, that they mightn't be familiar with the call-in process. So if you'd just like to just itemize that, and also the specific reasons on why it was agreed that this item be called into the committee, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. You are here to consider the calling of the Cabinet decision relating to the proposed Asylum Road care home. Cabinet, at its meeting on the 14th of October 2025, confirmed the disposal of the site comprising 128 to 148 Asylum Road and 133 to 137 Queens Road by way of a long leasehold interest to Andover Care Limited to deliver and operate a new care home at Asylum Road, SE15. The full decision of Cabinet is set out at paragraph 3 of the calling report, pages 12 and 13 of the agenda. Following the Cabinet decision, a request for calling was received from 5 members of the Council, Councillors Abacha, Dobson, Linforth Hall, Rule and Smith. Detail in connection with the calling is set out in the calling request form, Appendix 1 of the report, pages 16 to 23 of the agenda. The grounds for calling are quite detailed, and I will leave it for the calling spokesperson to address the committee around this. Additionally, circulated as part of the agenda papers is the open Cabinet report relating to the decision, pages 25 to 75, along with the Cabinet response to a Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission report on the proposed care home. This is contained in supplemental agenda number 1. The Cabinet response responds to the Commission's recommendations around undertaking a Gateway Zero report, an area of concern raised in the calling. There is a closed report relating to this decision, which has not been circulated with the agenda papers. The closed paper contains the financial information relating to the successful bid, the sum of the land transfer, and summary of the 4 bid returns. It is considered that the concerns raised in the calling can be dealt with without the need to refer to the closed papers. In reviewing whether the matter met the threshold for calling, it was difficult to reach a conclusion on the validity of the calling based on the information that was available, and to delve further into the issues to reach a conclusion would have encroached upon the calling process. It was therefore felt that on balance, it would be sensible for the matter to be put to the committee to enable discussion and clarity around the concerns and whether they are valid, and for the committee to identify any action it considers appropriate. In concluding the calling, having considered the decision and all relevant advice, the committee may either refer the decision back to Cabinet for reconsideration, setting out the nature of the committee's concerns, refer the matter to Council Assembly if the decision is deemed to be outside the policy and budget framework. This is not applicable in this case. Not refer the matter back to Cabinet, but decide to undertake a subsequent review, or simply not refer the matter back. Unless the Overview and Scrutiny Committee refers the decision back to Cabinet for reconsideration, the decision agreed by Cabinet will take immediate effect. Chair, if I may refer back to you to continue the calling proceedings.
Thank you, Everton. I appreciate what you've just outlined there. Does any members have any questions on the reasons for the call-in and why we're here? Procedurally. Yeah, Councillor.
Just so that we understand the scope of our remit correctly, this call-in is to consider the process to which the decision was made. Is that correct?
Do you want to respond to that?
The grounds for calling are set out in the scrutiny calling request form. There's quite a lot of information in there. it's not something I wanted to place any judgment on. And the difficulty I have is as soon as I start trying to justify or clarify myself, I'm there putting forward my own views on the issue, of which is something for members, elected members of the council, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to determine based on the information presented by the members who have requested the call-in and the responses of officers and the cabinet members.
The reasoning behind my question is so that we don't get waylaid with trying to, I guess, look at an issue that has many parts. I guess I want to understand what our remit as a overview and scrutiny committee is generally in looking at a decision, and whether or not that decision has fallen short of the required processes that ought to have been delivered. So I'm trying to understand what our remit is, just so that we can stay within boundaries. Well, not so that we, but so that at least I can stay within boundaries of what our scope is.
Okay. I mean, as I've said, the grounds for calling are set out in the scrutiny calling request form. In looking at this issue, it is quite a detailed and complicated issue in that this issue has been subject to scrutiny as the issue has developed. So it's not just the actual cabinet report, which would normally be the situation. You'd have a cabinet report, there'll be a decision in that cabinet report. Where we've changed our calling procedures, what we have is a situation where ordinarily we wouldn't have reached this position, because what we have essentially is 5 members of the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission requesting the calling of a decision which has been subject to scrutiny already. But what we have is a situation where before it was only members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that could call in a decision. You wouldn't have naturally had looked at this issue. There's been a cabinet response to the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission's recommendations already, and we operate a process whereby we don't have a continuation of the issue in terms of the cabinet response is usually final, but because the decision itself was later taken by cabinet, it kind of muddies the water and makes things grey. And in looking at the calling and the grounds for calling, there was information in there which I felt I couldn't say that it was a valid ground, but I couldn't say that it wasn't a valid ground without seeking further information, be it from officers or from the cabinet members. And what this kind of meant is if I started doing that, I would then become the person who's undertaking the calling myself, because I would get a response from officers. They'd come back and I'd think, okay, I kind of either accept that or I don't accept that. And that would be kind of shifting the goalpost. The calling has been based and made on information that was available at the time. And as soon as you start gathering additional information, it becomes a bit grey. So I felt the committee's remit is to establish whether or not there are any concerns, and it can do that by discussioning and questioning and hearing from those members who have raised the concerns and the officers. I'm in no way kind of insinuating that anything's wrong, but we've had this process, and yet there are still 5 councillors who are kind of not satisfied that the process has been followed. The way the call-in information is being presented is it's quite high level, but as you dig underneath that, it does bring up a few questions, which I'm sure there are legitimate answers to, but the only way to find those legitimate answers is to actually ask the question and hear the meeting out.
Okay, thank you. I've got 2 other members indicate. I've got Councillor Bentley and then Councillor Rose.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something for my own understanding. We don't have the closed report because it's not been circulated due to the commercial sensitivities. Did the Health and Care Scrutiny Committee see that report?
No. I mean, what I'd say is part of the cabinet decision-making process, members of Overview and Scrutiny Committee are automatically sent the closed papers. So the members of the committee would have received the papers at the time the cabinet agenda was circulated. So members whether they've read the information or not, they would have been subject to that information. But having reviewed those closed papers, it's considered that it's not necessary to actually review those closed papers for you to reach a conclusion on the matters raised in the call-in. What we try and do is as far as practical, is for callings to be held in open. And the second you start getting into closed papers, you have to close the meeting off and then open it off. So for purpose of practicality as well, we try and avoid that situation.
Councillor Rose?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, and I appreciate the remarks you made about changes to the call-in procedure that were recently made, and this being a reflection of that in your judgment in terms of why it's been brought to us this evening. As I understand it from what you've said then, the Health and Care Commission had issued its recommendations to Cabinet. Cabinet has provided a formal response and has not accepted all those recommendations.
Around a particular aspect of the call-in.
Yeah,
but
the
as you'll see, nearly every box is ticked as to
for grounds,
for calling.
for their suggested grounds for calling. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I just wanted to be clear about the implications for the overview and scrutiny body, in effect, having a judgment or a position on the Commission's findings and the response of Cabinet, if that's right.
Chair, we don't have provision in our constitution for a commission to call in a decision. What we have is provision for 5 councillors to request a call of a decision. The only way I could treat it, because we don't have provision for a commission to call in the decision, is that 5 councillors have requested the calling of a decision, and they've set out the grounds for calling. I couldn't reach a conclusion either way. If I try and elaborate on that, I start putting in my own opinions on the issue, and I've tried to avoid doing that. But just to say, I'm not saying that officer, the cabinet members have reached the conclusion that they've done anything wrong. What I'm saying is that there are grounds put in that calling which I believe deserve further exploration for the council to satisfy itself that the approach being taken by cabinet is sound and reasonable and proportionate, and then we can put the matter to bed, hopefully.
And just to clarify what you said earlier in terms of what this committee could recommend, I mean, we could recommend nothing. I mean, that's one option, but we could recommend that it goes back to Cabinet based on whatever conclusions we come to, or we can call for a review ourselves. Is that correct, what you said?
Yes, Chair, but I can't see on what grounds you'd be wanting to call for a review. I mean, the thing to point out is based on your discussions you have today, you may reach a conclusion that there were some things that could have been approached differently. You may kind of decide that this is completely the wrong way forward. Ultimately, it's for Cabinet to consider the information and decide what it wishes to do. All this committee can do is make recommendations to the committee, and it will be for Cabinet to consider that information and decide how it wishes to take the matter forward.
Okay, and just one further point. You also mentioned that the decision was in line with council policy, therefore it couldn't be referred to the council assembly.
It's when considering whether or not to request a call-in of a decision, it is for those members who are making the request for call-in to indicate whether or not they believe the decision is outside the budget and policy framework. If they tick that they believe it's outside the budget and policy framework, that then puts into process another course of action, which is consultation with the council's monitoring officer and section 151 officer to kind of give a view on whether or not they believe the decision is outside the budget and policy framework. And if they do, then some written communication will take effect and will be shared with the committee. On this occasion, members have not indicated that they believe that the decision is outside the policy framework. Therefore, that provision that is open to members doesn't apply.
I just wanted to be clear that we can't overturn the policy because the policy is in line. Yep.
I can only say members haven't indicated that they believe it's outside the policy framework.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I just wanted to clarify the point so everybody understands. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, Norman.
That's all right.
Good. Are there any other questions? No. I'm sorry, it feels as if we're sort of swimming in custard. It's just that we haven't done one of these call-ins for a little while, and I think it's beholden upon me as the chair to make sure that all members understand the procedure and exactly why we're here and what we're looking at before we progress with any further detail. So thank you for your questions, and thank you, Everton, for your responses. You can sit down now. Okay, so I'd like to invite the members who, those that are here, that called in the item, if they want to come to the front table. Suzanne, do you want to nip round the other side, if you don't mind, so we can see you full on? Okay, thank you. I know we've got 4 of the 5 councillors here, and just for the record, could you just state your names and positions just before we get any further? Thank you.
Councillor Charlie Smith, a member of the Social Care Scrutiny Committee.
Councillor Esme Dobson, councillor for Rye Lane Ward, and also a member of the Health and Social Care Scrutiny. Councillor Linforth Hall's got COVID, by the way. That's
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
Councillor Susan Abacho, Chair of the Health and Social Scrutiny.
Councillor Sandra Rule, Nunhead and Queens Road, member of the Health and Social Care Committee.
Thank you all for that. I'm happy for one of you to present, or if you want to divide it between yourselves in some way, okay. And then once that's over, then I'll open it up to members to ask questions if that's okay. But I think you're going to present, Suzanne. Is that correct? Okay, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and read slowly so that you understand what I'm saying. Good evening, everyone. This calling is not about questioning the need for more care home provisions in Southwark. We all agree that additional good quality nursing home is vital for our residents. What we are seeking today is clarity and assurance that the decision-making process for the Asylum Road Care Home has fully complied with the Council principle of transparency and accountability. The Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission carefully reviewed this matter and identified several areas of concern, which in our view require further explanation before implementing process. Our concerns falls broadly into 4 themes. First, governing and legal. It remains unclear whether the agreement is procurement or not. We have not seen clear evidence of any legal advice confirming that route chosen is fully compliant with procedures, laws, and the council's own contract standing order. Given that the project scale exceeds 10 million, we would have expected a Gateway Zero assessment of delivery option. Second, transparency and information accuracy. Cabinet members appear to have been provided with incomplete or outdated information about the selected operation, Andover Scale Limited, including ownership details, CQC rating, and track records. Accurate information is fundamental to good decision making. Third, consultation and engagement. While there was consultation with local neighbors wider engagement with key stakeholders such as COPSIN, Southwark Pension Action Group, and the Demetized Action Alliance did not take place, despite early indications that it would. Those voices are critical in shaping care provision for older residents. Finally, proportionally and long-term control. The proposed grant of a 999-year lease for a 90-bed facility, we question whether this structure is proportionally and how it safeguards the council long-term ability to ensure quality, affordability, and alignment with the residents' care charter. In summary, this calling seeks reassurance that the council decision-making process as adherence to the principle set out in the Article 1.3 of the Constitution. That decision are lawful, transparent, evidence-based, and taken with appropriate consultations and professional advice. Our question today reflects those principles. We hope that the discussion will provide greater clarity, identify any weakness and strength the council approach to further care home development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any other members want to add anything? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And I take the opportunity to thank the fact that we were able to call this in. In the April meeting of our committee, we were presented with this report that a new care home is going to be built on Asylum Road, and the timetable had already begun. And I think we thought, well, hold on a moment, we're supposed to be a scrutiny committee, not a rubber stamping committee. And there was a number of things that really worried us. The fact that we were told that we couldn't have a partnership, for instance, with the NHS. And I didn't see any report that made any contact with the local health authority about that, which I think annoyed us all. And secondly, the fact that the council, why can't the council build a care home? You know, wouldn't it be great if one day we had a care home built there and it was called the Ian Wingfield Care Home? No, seriously.
You'll probably put me in it, I think.
No, seriously, I should be serious, yeah. But there are other things that made us suspicious. You know, I think I asked, or someone asked a question about this provider, what sort of profit margin do they have? And we were told, oh, between 2% and 3%. And I thought, well, nobody works on that sort of margins. We subsequently found out, I think about 20% or something that, and that's in the private, that's money that's going to a private provider. It could be the council could be doing this, you know. And there were other things about whether these providers actually did any care homes in the past. And so, all right, £25 million, we were told. We didn't see any breakdown on that. Well, how was that brought about? You know, the fact that the council doesn't have any money. I mean, we're selling off council street properties like there's no tomorrow. Surely we could get some money from that area. So once again, we were really worried the fact that we were trying to have the wool pulled over our eyes. And I think we should really come back and look at this afresh. It'd be great if the council could build a nice home. I think 96 beds is too much. We've agreed. Is that agreed? Yep. Those, say one for me as well, Ian. But so that's what I'm asking this committee tonight, to maybe if we could go back again and start afresh, to be honest with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members want to say anything at this stage? No? Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to members of the committee. Councillor Von Wiese.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really grateful that the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission has picked this up, because that makes me hopeful. Thank you. That our scrutiny processes do work as they're meant to do, and that this has come to us here. I think we have certainly a few questions on this one, and you're absolutely right. Article 1.3 of the Constitution, which does ask for, you know, a transparent, proper decision making. maybe we'll come back to the question of what information the cabinet had at its avail later. But let me start with what I understand is the main concern here, and that is the way by which this new care home is to be delivered. And in particularly the fact that this was done by a land sale transaction, which seems a little bit odd. Because as you rightly said, there were two other options. One was to provide the care home ourselves as a council, and I understand from the response to recommendation 1 that there was simply no money for that. So please do confirm that that was the case. It says, as no capital funding is available, this option was discounted. Is that really all?
Can I say that, I mean, the council officers and cabinet members will be
Will come
coming
later.
later.
No,
so,
I do
So
understand
any
that.
questions like that, you can defer to later.
Well, maybe we keep the other one then for that as well. But am I right in understanding that your main concern here was the way by which this is supposed to be delivered, and also the fact that cabinet may not have had enough information to make an informed decision? And are you in general still of that opinion, having read the responses to your various recommendations?
Hello, thank you for your questions. So as you know, in order to do the call-in, we have to stick to very strict criteria. There were 9 options and we have written something for 8 of those 9 criteria. So we have a kind of range of concerns on lots of different issues, but on the 2 that you've just picked up just now, around the option of the land transaction route, if I understand correctly, when you do a land transaction as opposed to a procurement, you're not allowed to prescribe conditions. So we weren't allowed to, it was a case of going to the market and seeing what they could offer. And so one of our one of our concerns is, if we can't prescribe conditions, how can we enforce the terms of the residential care charter? So that was the under A, the link between strategy and implementation. Obviously, we have the residential care charter. We're not 100% sure of the legal status of it, but it is council policy strategy. And our understanding was that if it had been a procurement, we would have had a bit more power to kind of influence that rather than under the land transaction. Equally around what kind of beds. So a question is this route definitely providing us with what we most need? Because I understand that it's 30% nursing, 20% residential, but there's a clear need for nursing beds, but is there definitely a clear need for more residential beds, particularly in view of the fact that we're building a lot more extra care housing nowadays? That was your first one. What was your second question again? Oh, around the information. Yeah, so we did have some concerns that the cabinet members weren't given sufficient and accurate information. There was a question around the fact that the chosen provider had an outstanding rating, but it was 6 years old. And it has since been, so it no longer has an outstanding rating, it has a good rating. We had and within those 5 domains, the well-led requires improvement. We had a concern around the fact that the officers went to visit a home which actually doesn't accept local or authority funded residents. So we were concerned that that wouldn't give an accurate impression of the kind of quality of care that could be offered. There was a concern around, there were 4 bids in this procedure, and 2 of the bids came from companies which don't currently own a care home. So we were concerned, we were concerned about the number and quality of bids for this. You know, we're giving away a piece of land here, basically. So we should have attracted, it should be an attractive option, yeah. And then I think the final one was around a concern that around the fact that 2 of the 3 directors of the proposed company don't live in the UK. So there was a concern raised about that.
And just to follow up, so any of the responses that you have received alleviate any of these concerns?
Are you talking about responses to the cabinet? Yeah. So basically, we did a piece of work in the Scrutiny Commission about care home models, and we were requesting a Gateway Zero, and that was all we were asking for. This was back in June, and the response came back no. But then all of the information I've just said now, we only learnt in the October cabinet report. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're kind of 2 different processes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, thank you. Councillor Ottery, please.
Thank you very much. If I may, I'll just stick to the reasons for why you've called this in, just so that I can get a better understanding. So on the point you make around Gateway Zero, it's my understanding that you think there should have been a Gateway Zero process, right? Is that correct?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, it's just the yes or no, and then I guess I can have I can follow on from there.
This is a different cabinet report about, I think it's about flexicare housing. It says, under the council's contract standing orders, a pre-procurement or Gateway Zero report is required for any service with an estimated contract value of 10 million or more. I don't have a figure for the contract, but I think it is worth more than 10 million.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's useful for my understanding, because I understood that a Gateway Zero was needed where the implied value was 5 million or more, but I mean that's kind of irrelevant. What other reasons do you, other than the implied value of the contract, do you think a Gateway Zero was needed for this process?
So my understanding of the purpose of a Gateway Zero is to present different delivery options. Well, to rule out the idea that we could do it in-house is essentially, my understanding was essentially that was the purpose. But to go more in depth in terms of the options in terms of delivery.
I guess what would be really helpful for my understanding is to understand on what criteria you thought it was necessary for the Gateway Zero to be applied in this case. So it would be good to understand whether 2, 3 reasons other than the implied value of £10 million that you thought this project would cost. I'm trying to understand on what criteria you thought this project should have applied a Gateway Zero, and where that criteria hasn't been applied in this case.
So the report that the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission presented to Cabinet in June, and it was only one recommendation, that was to undertake a Gateway Zero. The desire and from the members of the Health and Social Care Scrutiny was that it be the different delivery options be looked at more in depth.
Chair, just to clarify, I'm trying to understand the criteria in which we think that Gateway Zero should have been applied, because there is a criteria for Gateway Zero being applied to projects, and what I'm trying to understand from what's been submitted here is whether that criteria was followed or not, and if not, on what basis was that criteria not followed in applying Gateway Zero to this project? Is that, sorry, maybe my question's not clear, but it's just so that I can understand where we're...
Can I bring Councillor Rose in? Sorry, just...
This might be a question best answered by officers in a bit, but from your perspective as a commission, are you clear on the distinction between, if you like, the overall land value of the transaction, which has to have a value to it, it's council land and there's a land deal, versus the actual value of the services that are commissioned within that building once it's built by the partner? And I maybe that's the question that officers can explain, why there's an interpretation of it requiring Gateway Zero because it's over the threshold, but the service commissioning might be below a threshold, and what we're looking at is the overall value of the site and the investment, and that might be the thing to unpick. And just on the other point, you mentioned the 999-year lease. There is, I think that my experience would be that that relates to, if you like, a form of security for the partner in terms of physical capital investment over a period of time. Is not a literal thing around 999 years, but it is important, and you're right to raise it. But there is, within the documentation I've seen and responses, in effect, a 10-year service break clause, if not sooner, depending on the quality of provision. So is that your understanding as well?
So officers, we have been discussing with this within the Commission for a while, and officers have been very clear to us that a land transaction is not a procurement. In their opinion, that's why Gateway Zero was not necessary. But our understanding also is that there will be a supplementary agreement for the care service. So presumably, and we're happy to be enlightened and corrected and all the rest of it, but that will be a later procurement procedure. In as far as I can see, that would be definitely worth more than 10 million. So one of our questions is, you know, is that a later procurement procedure? Is that subject to a Gateway Zero? And sorry, your last question was around
Concerns about the lease. A couple of you have mentioned the length of the lease. And
there was something else you asked
but
as well.
in the documentation I've read,
Yeah,
the response indicates that there are built-in sort of abilities to review service and delivery and clauses.
So just to say that we have 7 care homes for older people in the borough, and 5 are currently based on the same model, which is it's council land, it's a council building, and we have a third party provider providing the care. Yeah, there are 2 that are different to that. One is a mission care home, which is a voluntary sector, so it's their land, their building, they're providing the care. And then the last one is the home that we opened in 2022, Camberwell Lodge, and that was done under a procurement procedure. So that was council land, but the provider built the building and they provide the care. So for us, the model for the first 5, that it's a lot clearer if there's a 10-year contract and the provider, the quality of the care is not, you know, sufficiently good. It's easier to break the contract and to go to procurement again and to replace the provider because we've still got the land and the building. Yeah. For us, it becomes more complicated when the provider has built the building. For us, it seems harder to get out of a contract when you're in a contract where they've built the building. The previous director of commissioning, Jeanette Laws, did come to a health and social care, I think it was last year, and explained the Camberwell Lodge model and said there is provision for the provider to have to rent the building to another provider, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this one here that we're doing now, is not the same model as the Camberwell Lodge either. It's a new model. Yeah. I don't know whether that helps at all.
Okay, I've got Councillor Bentley.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on Councillor Smith's point about the NHS. So in the 5 recommendations that you made to Cabinet, the 4th one says about exploring partnership with the NHS, and the response suggests that that was done. And I just wanted to clarify that when you were doing your work as a scrutiny commission, you didn't see any evidence of that. You weren't provided with anything that supported that. Okay. So just to clarify, you didn't see any evidence? Yeah.
No, we didn't see any evidence of that, as far as I'm aware. That's right, yeah.
Does anybody else want to come in? Can I just refer you to page 30 of the report, please, and paragraph 25. It's just picking up on the points that were made. So that Councillor Rose indicated about the 10-year contract. There's also reference there to a commitment to the London living wage, and that the approach here aligns largely with the council's residential care contract. So you're aware of these factors when you consider it as a commission.
Sorry, I think I might have missed that question.
Yeah, sorry, I was just referring you to paragraphs 25 and 26
Yeah.
of the report, which is on page 30 of my document, where just apropos what Councillor Rowe said in relation to the 10-year break in the contract, and it also refers to the London Living Wage as part of the package, and that it's broadly in line with the council's residential care charter. So you considered all this, did you, as a commission?
Yes.
You did?
Yep.
Okay, fine. Right, just
Yes.
checking.
Our question around the residential care charter is because it was a land transaction route and not a procurement route. In the bid pack that went out in April, they weren't allowed to prescribe. Yeah. So we just want some reassurances about the legality of how this, of whether the residential care charter can definitely be enforced, and if so, how. And the fact that they said that the proposed company, that their approach aligned broadly with the residential care charter, we would like to know which bits don't align.
Okay, that's fine. Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Prior to this meeting, of course, I've read the papers at your scrutiny meeting, and of course watched it online just to get some idea of what actually happened. And I see that you asked very similar questions at that meeting. Okay. And when I suppose I should have asked Everton this question early on, because obviously your scrutiny committees have the ability to, if they're not satisfied with questions, to request written responses. Okay. I see some written responses requested, but not on the range of queries that have been submitted as part of this call-in. Can you just tell us why that didn't happen?
Can I just clarify, are you referring to the April 2025? Yeah, because we didn't get a lot of the information until the October Cabinet report came out.
I think that's answered that one, yes. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Tree.
Yeah, in the paper submitted, page 19, section G, it says that page 19 on section G for the reasons for this call-in, as part of the section on presumption of favour of openness, some of the reasons that are given by yourselves who have called it in refers to issues around their CQC ratings, the directors living abroad, and I think you might have cited profit and how much they had made during your submissions. Are you able to explain to me how the reasons you've given present a presumption of favour of openness in the process, i.e. where they live and what the CQC ratings are? I'm just trying to marry the two up.
So I don't know whether there's a distinction between openness and transparency, but it's a case of the report presented to the cabinet members said that the company had an outstanding rating when it didn't. I don't believe the cabinet members were given any information about where the directors live. And it's a kind of like, it's a detail, but a very important detail, that the officers visited a home which doesn't accept local authority funded residents. So that kind of detail wasn't contained in the cabinet report. Does that make sense?
Okay. Any further questions? No? Okay, you can retire back to your seats, and thank you for your evidence. Okay, so I'd like to call the cabinet members and the relevant officers forward, please. I hope we've got enough chairs. Okay, like before, if you would just start by introducing yourselves and your positions, please. We'll start with Steve and work our way around. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Committee. I'm Stephen Platt, Director of Planning and Growth.
Good evening, councillors. I'm David Quirk Thornton, the Strategic Director of Children's and Adults.
Good evening, Councillor Helen Dennis, Cabinet Member for New Homes and Sustainable Development.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Okoto, Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing.
Good evening, I'm Pauline O'Hare, Director of Adult Social Care.
Good evening, Claire Bellegarde, Acting Director of Integrated Commissioning.
Good evening, Catherine Brownell, Head of Sustainable Growth North.
Thank you all. Obviously, you've heard the reasons why we're here today, and you've heard from the 5 councillors that requested the call in. Obviously, it's up to you how you intend to respond to that, or whether you want to say, I don't know if the cabinet members want to reply first, and then officers take up individual points, and then obviously I'll throw it open to members for questioning, if that's okay. So, ball's in your court.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to members of the committee for allowing us to speak to you today. As you see, we've got a number of officers here, mainly because the process is quite technical, so it's important that we provide the right information to you. I do appreciate that for the Health and Scrutiny Committee, the process may be a bit opaque, and that's because of the complexity of it. And I would also like to say that though is a very important decision, it's also an exciting position or kind of a decision for Southwark, being able to build a new or have a new nursing home within the borough where other local authorities are closing the nursing home. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. I will say that this project has been under discussion for a long time, and many of the points raised in the callings we have answered severally. We have explored some of the questions through earlier scrutiny sessions and meetings, cabinet reports, and various communications between ourselves and various members of the Health and Scrutiny Committee. So we have answered in various ways the questions that are being raised again today, but we're happy to answer it again. This proposal exists because Southwark has a gap in nursing care capacity within the borough. Right now, families are having to place the loved ones out of the borough because of lack of capacity. And it's important that we deal with this right now. Some of you will know that we have an aging population. It states that by 2041, 6 of our residents will be someone age of 64. And we know that we are living longer, but yet with more complex needs. So it's important that we actually start addressing that right now. And the Asylum Road Nursing Home gives us a way to do this. I mean, there's a lot of things I want to respond to, but I think what I am going to do is hand over to some officers. And I'm sure we've highlighted some of the points that has been raised, and we can answer it again. I will also say, I mean, with the point about the NHS, I think we have responded in various ways about the response. I've personally spoken, when I have evidence, spoken to the Strategic Director for Health and Care about the possibility to have a partnership with the NHS. And I think what I want to emphasize, that it's in all our best interest to make sure we have the best possible service here and home. So we've looked at all options, and we have ruled out accordingly because of the responses that we have. But I have looked at the NHS, partnership with the NHS, partnership with VCS, etc. And with the CQC rating, at the time of writing, the CQC rating was outstanding. Obviously, we know the CQC changes as and when CQC goes in and inspect. So obviously during that time, it was re-rated as good, and one domain as it requires improvements. And we acknowledge that as at last cabinet meeting, we acknowledge it and we change the information accordingly. I think I'll leave it. I will answer the questions afterwards, but I'll, okay, Helen.
Thanks very much. I think there was just a couple of things that I wanted to add. Firstly, all of us, I think, cabinet members, officers, all think that there is a really exciting proposition on the table, which ticks the criteria that we set to meet when we started this process. And we really want to move forward because we think we have a great partner, and we think that, well, we know from the assessment work that's been done that we need to provide, and we want to provide more in borough nursing care for our residents. We do not have an outstanding council delivery plan commitment in this area, having spent the capital that was set aside for the purchase of Tower Bridge nursing home. And so as a result, that has meant the kind of joint working across adults and children's with planning and growth to really try and find a way forward that will give best value to the council. That proposition, and I know Everton mentioned that there wasn't felt a need to kind of recirculate the closed report to members, but I would say if we did want to move into closed session to discuss the details of that proposition, that, you know, we are excited and we think it is a really great deal for the council. So if the chair is minded to move into closed session, then we could set that detail out for members. And as Everton mentioned, that was circulated to OSCE members alongside the cabinet report in October. The second thing is just, and I think Steve will speak about this in some more detail, is that as cabinet member, I am assured that the kind of process around the land transaction followed council policy as set out in our asset management plan and how we deal with the disposal of surplus lands, but you know, not just a kind of pure disposal in this instance, but a disposal for social purpose and for the aims and objectives of the council. Again, that can be looked at in some more detail, but I think what's really fundamental, and it goes to the point that was being made about is this a procurement or not, is we went to the market to see what could be offered, and if we didn't like what came back, if they weren't committed to London Living Wage, for example, if we didn't have a good or outstanding operator, then we could have just said no and parked the process, which was why we had much more flexibility than if you were going through a traditional procurement process. So I think those are the kind of points I just wanted to make from the planning and growth, kind of cabinet member planning and growth side at the start of the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Committee, I suppose, I think we can all agree, we're all aligned. What we want to do is open a fantastic new nursing home with fantastic care as quickly as possible. And I just want to reassure everybody, we're at the start of quite a lengthy process here. So this is the first decision, but there'll be two more equally as important decisions as we move forward. One of those will be Planning Permission, which is obviously a very public process, and then the final decision will be around the care contract, and colleagues in Agriculture Care and Dave will cover off that later on, no doubt. In terms of procurement versus land transaction is effectively disposal. Norman, no doubt, will give us advice, but effectively they're governed by two legal structures. So disposal effectively for general fund assets, which this is governed by the Local Government Finance Act, whereas the procurement is governed by the procurement legislation, public procurement. So under a land transaction, which this is, and was how it was reported to Cabinet, we are very confident that the appropriate legislation and our governance and constitutional issues were followed to the letter. And I think the concurrent by the Borough Solicitor effectively confirms that. Our requirement, there is no requirement in relation to a disposal land transaction for a Gateway Zero. The formal decision point is a cabinet report, which is obviously an open report, which is a public meeting, and issues can be assessed at that point. The legislation principally around disposal is mainly around best consideration received for an asset. And again, you've received closed papers, I think, and so you'll understand the details of the commercial transaction which were reported in the closed papers. So there was no requirement for a Gateway Zero. The appropriate governance arrangements were followed in accordance with the land transaction. I suppose the second question is that the right process to follow to achieve the best outcome for this authority? We have no formal policy on that, whether when we're setting up a project and deciding to deliver a project, whether it's a procurement or whether it's a land transaction stroke disposal or alternative arrangements for delivery for a successful project to deliver the benefits we're looking for. It's mainly down to the principal project officer responsible for that project to give the technical advice to the authority. In this case, it wasn't just the technical advice from officers. We sought third-party technical advice from people who are experts in this field. We don't do this every day. We're not experts at the delivery and procurement of nursing homes. However, there are people out there who do it every day, who are experts in the marketplace and can advise on the best route forward to deliver to the outcomes we're hoping to achieve for our residents. We took that advice. Our advisors were, correct me, Catherine, to get this wrong, JLL, who a national firm, who have a specialist team who work in this area on a national basis. And they gave us very clear advice that to achieve the outcomes we want, the most appropriate method for delivery was to go through a disposal land transaction. The main reason is the flexibility that gives you around the negotiation and the negotiated settlement in bringing forward a creative and commercially driven project. But you know, there are pros and cons to disposals to procurement, and I think the Adult Social Care Commission highlights under a land transaction, you may have to compromise on some of the controls around the project you could actually put on within a contract. I don't see that as necessarily a bad thing. And I want to give you the example of Appleby Blue, which has just won the Sterling Award prize, which was a land transaction delivered through a partnership with St Saviour's and the developer JTRE. That was not a procurement and has now been delivered a facility which is recognised as the best new building in the country. And so I don't think that route necessarily means a poor outcome. I think given the advice we got from the experts in this field, our overall objective in delivering a high quality home with high quality care, it was the appropriate way to go. And we're pretty confident that in terms of the council's governance and in terms of the legislation around this, that was followed. In terms of the lease length, there's been some discussion about length of lease and concerns around that. I think the important thing to recognise, which Councillor Rose did recognise, is that a private party is going to be investing up to £25 million into this project, and they do need an interest in the land to effectively to reassure them that they're going to get a return on that investment. Whether it's 125 years or 999 years is really irrelevant. It's about the strength of that security. From my perspective, however, the important thing is that it is a lease. It's not a freehold we are transferring. So the important element of that lease is the restrictive use under that lease. So we are securing that use theoretically for 999 years, although I suspect we might not be around by then, neither will Southwark be. But it does mean that it secures that asset in that use in perpetuity into effect. So for me, that is the important thing about the lease. It's securing that use moving forward. The only way they can change the use is to come to the council and seek our authority to change the use, which would be at our discretion. Who knows what's going to happen in the future. But I really do believe that this will deliver a fantastic outcome for Southwark and its residents as quickly as possible. And we feel that the advice is correct, the process was followed correctly. This is effectively a disposal. The technical definition of a disposal is an interest in land over 7 years. So obviously we meet that test. It was 999 years, not 7 years. And there will be a lot of further opportunities that we run through that process, this process over the next 4 to 5 years, for additional scrutiny, for discussions around both the planning application, details of design, scale, height, massing, layouts, etc. And then when we get onto the care contract as well. In terms of partner selection and how we selected who we think is going to be a fantastic partner for the council, I will probably refer to colleagues who are more involved in that process than me.
Thank you very much. David?
Thank you. I'll keep this brief, but I'd like to start by saying, I recognise what Councillor Koto has said in terms of the journey and discussions with NHS and the need for more nursing care in the borough, despite the fantastic Appleby Blue, which we're delighted to see all the people living in our borough. So I think some of the concerns that have come up in this call-in actually don't relate to this decision specifically, but relate to a decision that will be taken later. I'm sorry, there's some echo. Shall I try different?
It sounded more godlike.
Well, then I better humble myself in that case. That's better, thank you. So I think some of the concerns that have come up in the call-in are not actually directly related to the land transaction and the decision that Cabinet made. But I welcome the opportunity to touch on them tonight, because I'm always trying to get people to talk about social care. So I'll take that opportunity. So later, as Steve said, there's 2 more decisions to come. One is on planning, And that will be a fantastic opportunity for partners and stakeholders to contribute in terms of good design for a nursing care home. And remember that the population in our residential nursing care homes is changing. Dementia is fast increasing across our community. So 20 years ago, when I was commissioning care homes, nursing and residential, dementia was a small part of it. Now it's a really, really big part of it. So it's right that we will take time and care to get the design of this care home right. And the planning process and working with this partner will enable us to engage with people. We had some very good recent experience with Tower Bridge. When the owners of Tower Bridge wanted to close and we stepped in and bought it, we were able to work with the people living there, their family relatives, and the staff, and to listen to them about what's really important about good care. And of course, you know, we have all that feedback from them, and we carry that with us through and into this process. But there will be time in the planning to significantly influence the design, and we all want a fantastic care home on this site. But the third decision then is the service agreement. So the service agreement and the cabinet decision has been delegated to me. And when it comes to service agreement, what I'd like to reassure the Commission and Overview and Scrutiny is that I have no discretion to set aside council policy in making a service agreement. So whatever our policies are at the time, I have to apply them, otherwise I can't agree the agreement. And we've not had difficulties in that space before. We've introduced an ethical care charter in our home care. We've introduced an ethical care charter in residential care. So as the Chief Officer agreeing that service agreement, I am required to ensure that the Council's policies are fully implemented in that. So residential care charter being our policy, I have to insist on residential care charter being fully implemented in that service agreement. And it's really helpful if the provider who's coming in already pays living wage, because that's the cost bit of the charter. Other parts of the charter are also hugely important, but they don't necessarily have a cost. I'll give you two examples. One is that every care home must have a family forum so that relatives have a voice in the quality of care and can give feedback, and that's recorded. And then the commissioners and the contract monitor folk go in and they see all that feedback, and they see the questions, and they can follow up on, here's some feedback about the food, here's some feedback about the staffing levels, what have you done with that? So we require care homes to have a family forum, and we look at the notes of those family forums. Another example would be training for staff. You'll all appreciate that good quality care really requires training for staff. So we require that staff in the care homes are trained appropriately for the full range of jobs that they do. So the care charters is something I'm immensely proud of, and I'm delighted to work in a borough that has agreed them. So of course, when it comes to the service agreement, we will be fully implementing the Council's policies, including the residential care charter. But I also just want to reference a couple of other points on the service agreement, if I may. So at the moment, the government is undertaking some work around fair pay in social care, and we expect that will fall out in terms of requirements before this service agreement comes in. I'll also have to follow national policy on fair pay. I can't specify that at the moment because I don't know what the detail is, but I know it's coming, and that will be a requirement. Dame Louise Casey is undertaking a review of adult social care for the government. There will be some fallout from that, which again we'll have to implement. And finally, the government have also said they have an aspiration for a national care service. We don't yet have the details of that, but all the signals and communications we're getting from the Department of Health and Social Care said that will be more about standards rather than in a national care service like a national health service. So again, I'll have to comply with those standards. So it's a way of saying really that when it comes to the service agreement, which I think is much of the concerns, which I welcome people asking those questions, because I want everyone to be assured that actually at the time of that I will have to ensure that the contract complies with council policy and complies with national policy. And I have no discretion to step outside it, nor would I wish to. Thank you.
That's very reassuring to hear. Thank you. Okay, so it's open to members. I've got Councillor Von Fiesa. Did Councillor Autry, did you have your hand up? Yep, I saw you. Okay. And then Councillor Robertson, Councillor Rose, and Councillor Johnson. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for that explanation. As you rightly say, I think ultimately the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but since we're not eating that for a while, I completely understand, in particular, what you were saying about being bound by the residential care charter when it comes to service delivery. However, I don't think that is what this is about. What we're talking about here is the procedure by which the partner was selected, if I understand correctly, and that partner, in this case, Endeavour Care Limited, obviously does have some form of influence on the further delivery of these services, and it's about the way in which that part was selected. And again, I understand there were different options here, and you were specifically saying something about the land transaction offering more flexibility. Again, that's fine. I get that. And I should say, although I'm a lawyer, I am not really a specialist in public procurement. But from what I remember from having practiced a long time ago, there is a reason why public procurement has very strict rules as to value for money and specific criteria, whereas other transactions such as land disposals do not. So again, the question is this here more of a sort of precedent or a slippery slope problem where, well, isn't that possibly true for a lot of different procurement that we do when we outsource services? Couldn't we always use a more flexible route by simply leaving public procurement to one side and using a land disposal instead? And to me, I'm sorry, but that sounds a little bit like circumventing the public procurement rules. Could you say a little bit more about that? And if I may just sneak in something else, which I remember from the call-in presentation, somebody said something about the profit that Endeavour is going to make. And is it true that that number is closer to 20% than the 1 or 2%? I just wanted clarity because that stuck somehow in my ears. Thank you.
Well, just on that second point, we'd have to go into closed session for that, wouldn't we?
Okay. Well, it was just because it was mentioned. It would be interesting to know.
There's lots of things mentioned, but they might have to be heard in closed session. That's the point. So would that have to be heard in closed session?
I think we can cover most of it off actually in open. I don't think we need to go into the detailed financial numbers, but I think we can give some reassurance about the selection process we went through and how we ended up selecting a partner. And I'm really pleased you referred to them as a partner, because I really see this as a partnership between us and Andover, and the process identified a partner we'll be working with over the next 4 to 5 years to deliver a fantastic outcome for the authority. I think it's very, are we using this process to avoid a procurement, I suppose, at the end of the day? The answer is no. We've used this process because that's on the advice from technical advisors who are experts in this field. This would result in the best outcome for the local authority. So it wasn't necessarily the council deciding to follow that route. Well, the council did decide to follow that route, but that was on advice from technical experts. And that was about levering in, if you like, market expertise in the delivery of the outcome we're trying to achieve. So I said we appointed JLL quite early on in the process to give the council advice around this, and they were very clear, and Catherine might want to say a little bit more about this. They were very clear about why this process was the optimum process to achieve the outcome we wanted, rather than go through procurement. In terms of public procurement, yes, there are sort of hurdles in terms of values and the processes you have to go through depending on which value. A land transaction doesn't have those values attached to them. Within our own constitution and our scheme of management, we do have values attached to disposal decisions. So disposal decisions up to £3 million are, and this is public, so I don't need to go in close, are a matter for delegation to myself and the Assistant Director of Property. Disposals over £3 million are a matter for Cabinet. So that is, and this disposal was reported to Cabinet, which is the appropriate place for the decision in accordance with our constitution and in accordance with our legislation as well. But Catherine, do you want to share a bit about how we selected the partner? Because I think that's important to understand that it was a joint process with colleagues at Social Care who came upon the decision that these were the partners we wanted to work with over the next few years. Over to you, Catherine.
Yes, hi. So we worked with JLL, who are sector specialists, and they had over 100 people on their books who would be interested in working in the southeast of the UK. So they put the offer out to all of those. Now, it's not a form of development that's sort of hugely popular. So we had about there was 8/9 expressions of interest in that. We interviewed a number of those, and we got 4 bids back. We, in the process, had set up a steering group that was a combination of our head of property and myself on the sort of property side. I've got a background in design and project management, and we had senior people from adult social care on the steering group as well, who are here this evening too. And we also had Jessica Neese on the panel. So we had a cross range of optics on those bids, both the commercial optic, the design optic, and the care and the commissioning optic. So through those interviews and processes, we also visited one. The reason we only visited Andover, I know that's a point that's been raised, is because two of the people expressing interest were between portfolios of care homes, and the one didn't actually have any. They just sold a bunch and they were looking to build up their portfolio again. The other one was on site with a development and again was building up its portfolio again. The fourth one is a partner who we already know very well, and our colleagues in adult social care visit them regularly. So there was no need to go and visit that one. So we visited the Andover Care. And through that process, we were making our decision. But yeah, we had interviewed some of them twice, so it was very thorough, and that was the process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ottery, please.
Thank you. Throughout the presentation, a number of references have been made to this being a disposal. But I think we should probably correct the record in saying that this isn't a pure disposal, because let's just imagine a case where we all lived beyond 999 years, we would get that property back. So this isn't a pure disposal. I think we should just clarify that. And on that point, where there is a land transaction where there isn't a pure disposal, then Gateway 0 ought to be used according to our criteria on our council website. So I'm trying to understand, in the case where there isn't a pure disposal in a land transaction where Gateway 0 should be implemented, why wasn't it done in this case?
I'm going to bring in Norman first.
Yeah, Chair, to answer your question, the Gateway 0, the pre-procurement process, only takes back when it's a contract as covered by contract standing orders. Contract standing orders specifically exclude land transactions. I think it's in 1.3 of the contract standing orders. So that in carrying out a land transaction, there would never be a Gateway 0 because it's not covered by our own contract standing orders.
To shed a bit more light on what that means when you're giving out a long lease.
The director of planning and growth quite correctly said, it's two different regimes. As a procurement, it would be covered by the recent Procurement Act, but under a land transaction, it would be covered by the Local Government Act 1972, which means that unless it's something really short, like a 2-week lease, we can only dispose of at best consideration without the permission of the Secretary of State, so that the disposal terms would meet the best consideration process. Because in both schemes, either a procurement or a land transaction, you are bound by best value, and it's just the different ways that best value are applied. It's the value of the transaction, the disposal, what the disposal of the lease is worth on that site, and what we can get for it.
That's super clear. And on that, just linked to, remind me again of your name, please. Catherine mentioned something seems quite odd to me. So a private company that we've used as advisors, JLL in this case, has a list of 100 companies, right? We're not quite sure how those companies are constructed and how they come up with the list, how you get onto that list of 100. And using advisors and the list of 100 that they've constructed, whether through relationships they've had in the long term, personal relationships they might have with directors at JLL, we've then decided to select a provider from a list from a private company without understanding how that list is constructed. Are you able to shed a bit more light on how that list is constructed and whether that appears as being fair open as a, I guess, a public authority procuring a service from a list that's constructed by one that we may or may not know how it was constructed?
I mean, these are major sector specialists. They're on our Crown Commercial Services framework. We haven't just plucked them out of nowhere. They're there, and that's all assessed, and they're rated, and it's all very transparent why they're on there, what credentials they have to be on there. So it's fair for us as a local authority to access through one of our recognised frameworks, a major supplier in the sector.
Right, thank you. Councillor Roberts next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was also going to ask about the Gateway Zero, but I think that has now been covered. I think one of the things that stuck out for me in the presentation by the Care Commission was that they have these misgivings, obviously, about the service that Andover are going to provide in the long term. That seems to be a big part of why they've called this decision in. And I just wanted to know what the council can do if this goes through, and if we get to a point where they are providing that service, what levers, what mechanisms do the council have to say if those misgivings come to fruition? If they are not providing a good enough service, how can we make sure that we can address that? And it was also mentioned that one of the care home that you went to of Andover didn't take local authority funded residents. So where there is no equivalence in service as to what will be provided here, what are the kind of parameters that the council use to look at different types of care homes?
Oh, sorry. So starting with the last one, it probably might be the easiest, which is that we visited that home because that was the one that the easiest one for us in terms of time to go and visit, and we visited because we wanted to see what was the care delivery. The home was in St Albans, and I don't think the market required them to take on local authority residents in that particular home. But they had other homes that they took local authority residents, and they are quite keen, as part of the discussions with them, that they would take on local authority residents, because the local authority offers a guarantee in terms of income. So the homes, you know, different organisations have homes up and down the country, but St Albans was a reasonable distance for us to see the first home that was available. You asked about how do we monitor quality, and it's not just us that monitor quality, it's also CQC. But in terms of how we set up the process of when we go into procurement, we will be setting up standards and KPIs and other elements really in terms of the care. And we also have a team who do contract monitoring, and they will also be making sure that the care delivery that is provided is of the standard that we would like to have. Also by having the residents meetings, and also we have social workers that visit and review people on a regular basis. And there's quite a triangulation really of information that goes from the social workers to the contract monitors, and then also with CQC, because our commissioners also have regular meetings with CQC in terms of discussing the homes and the standards. We also have very clear links and work very, very closely with health colleagues, and they are also entering the homes on a regular basis, and they also give us information and any concerns that they have. So there's quite a triangulation really of information. The homes are quite keen to, you know, to work with us, and we chose a 10-year, you know, we would propose a 10-year contract in the first instance, because that's to a degree the sweet spot of where you give the organisation the opportunity to set themselves up, and then you monitor it, and then if you're completely dissatisfied with the care, then after the, you know, you've got time to look for alternatives. But mostly with the providers, we work in partnership with the providers, so we would always be looking for them to have a good standard of care, and if there's any reason why that care slips, we would be working with colleagues in health and across the board to make sure that that level of care comes back up to the standard that we want. Because the care homes, they don't just have that home, they will have other homes, and if they lose the reputation on that home, they will lose the reputation on all of their homes. So it is something that they really work towards, is to deliver a good level of care.
Thank you very much. That was all the questions? Yep. Okay. Councillor Rose, please.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand the component parts of the presentation this evening, what the issues are. And as far as I can ascertain, the component parts are the mechanisms within the world as it is, in order for the local authority to reinstate and continue to deliver a care home in the south of the borough that's been absent and lacking since 2018. So we've talked about procurement, and we've talked about land transfer and land sanctions. Now, you can take a view on the two things, but it's recognised and understood that land transfer is a mechanism and device that's been approved as a tool and vehicle to deliver lots of services, and it applies in different contexts across the council. Sometimes it involves services on those lands, sometimes it's the land, and there's other outcomes that we seek. But it's a given that it's a recognised and robust process for achieving a goal and objective. And in this case, we have the land, we have a lack of a care home, we've put the two things together, and we've come up with a strategy for delivery that sits within a broader strategic framework around our commitment to care homes. We know the market's precarious and vulnerable. We've stepped in and bought Tower Bridge. Probably can't do that again. So what are we going to do to shore up the sector and maintain the level of provision? And this is the mechanism and route that's been determined after lots of reflection. And it would seem from the evidence given that within either the existing framework, there is no appetite for the formal procurement or a version of procurement that may have been previously used to deliver these services. I think that's the implication. So We then protect the quality of the service that's delivered on the invested by the investment in the building and the land, because we have the Residents' Care Charter, we have London Living Wage, we have policy and a framework that does that. And again, we can open that up to scrutiny, improvement, and development over time, because we can do that within the local authority. The accountability is there. So I really appreciate the approach, and then maybe there is a broader argument about gateway zeros and land transactions, but I can't find any evidence that, given the tools and mechanisms that were available to us as a local authority, cabinet members and officers being pragmatic about ensuring delivery that we're committed to, that they haven't used a recognised and robust form of delivery, is the fundamental point. You can take a view on which one you prefer, but that's the one that's been done and it's been proven. So that's my understanding of that. What we're trying to do is to sort of de-risk the delivery over time to ensure the best quality service for our residents and those that are most vulnerable, that are going to need the care. And so I think, there may be some outcomes from this process where we go back and we look and review, and we take learnings from this process about making that more obvious and transparent. But I also understand that, both the strategic framework for care home and adult services has gone through a lot of scrutiny and development over time, and there are other cabinet reports that set out those strategies clearly with delegated aspects and an approach for different circumstances. And there also has been a strong and robust budgeting process which recognises that land transaction is a mechanism that we can use, and there is a best value piece around that and the best use of council money and resources to deliver the services. I know that we are committed to direct service provision. I've overseen the bringing in-house of the leisure services and other aspects of tree maintenance and other things. But there are some things that reflect the market circumstance and the level of need that need other mechanisms to respond to them. So it's been really interesting and enlightening this evening, but I think that's where I'm sitting with this. But I would welcome any comments from the panel over and above that assessment.
Thank you. To the point that you make, Councillor Rose, about different sectors, different markets requiring different responses. I know the Commission were very keen on, I was considering direct delivery, and I'll say tonight what I said back in April. As officers, we will always consider direct delivery, because that's what our politicians have asked us to look at. We've worked in public sector a very long time. We believe in public sector. And just recently, we have built and are running 2 children's homes in this borough. That's in my department. And I am proud as punch that we have built 2 children's homes, and the staff working in those homes work for this council. And we came to that position because we looked across that market and thought, no, the market cannot do better, cannot do cheaper, cannot give the security for the children those homes. So we have gone, hell for leather on direct delivery of 2 children's homes in this borough. And this borough hasn't had children's homes for decades. The world had changed over the decades, and we had some decades ago, but now we have 2, so that children can live in this borough in a place that they're familiar with people who look like them and get really high quality care, and this council is delivering that. So I mention that simply to say, as officers, we do respect the aspiration of this council to directly provide public services, and we're proud to do that. In relation to adult social care, my whole career, and Pauline's too, actually, we're sort of similar length of time in adult social care, has been a deconstruction of adult social care by government after government after government, and into a market. So you'll normally hear me refer to sector, but when it comes to adult social care, I will use the word market, because actually there was legislation which required local authorities to enable a diverse market. And so when you deconstruct something, what you're then left with is what standards can you bring in to try to achieve high quality care. And then, of course, there's always best value in there too. So, you know, when a few years ago, when we got the money to build a council home in line with the council plan commitment, that money sat as a capital budget in my department, and that's what we would have liked to do. And then Tower Bridge risked closing. The owners were clear that they wanted to exit the market. We were faced with more than 200 people, frail elderly people in the care home who we would have had to move. We were faced with staff who would have lost their jobs. And having dealt with some closures of care homes in my career, I can tell you it's not good for folk. You know, there's a heavy price to pay for that. So I'm grateful that we were able to buy Tower Bridge, to not have to move more than 200 frail, vulnerable people, and to secure the jobs, and then to work with those people and their families to get a good provider in. So simply by passage of time, things changed for me from having millions of pounds in the capital pot that I could use to go and build a new care home to suddenly having no money in that capital pot because we had to do something. And I stand by that decision today. So when you then find yourself in that reality of not having capital available and you are operating in a market, you then have to consider the other options. So I'm really grateful to colleagues in sustainable growth. They have worked with us every step of the way on this journey, and they've listened to what people want from a high quality care home. It is a different route than we originally thought we would be pursuing some years ago. And where I can pursue direct delivery and direct build, I do that. You know, children's homes and other services, I do that. But in this case, the market is mature and is understood, and it is an option. So it was no surprise to me in these circumstances then that there would be some providers really keen to come to London, really keen to come to Southwark, and to build a care home. And for these companies who are, you know, regional or national companies, they very much view Southwark as a beacon for their organisation. They want their London home, their Southwark home to be really, really good. So through the planning, you know, I trust and hope we will sweat that in the best interest for our residents. And then when it comes to the service agreement, I will ensure that the council's policies, national policies, are fully implemented. So I agree with both Councillor Dennis and Councillor Cota when they said at the start, this is a very exciting opportunity. And we will not be sleeping on the job when it comes to the design or to the service agreement. But I thought what you said, Councillor Rose, was really helpful because it did acknowledge that over time, you know, our position has changed and we have simply followed a route to achieve an outcome in a pretty timely manner to get more capacity in the borough, which is my duty to say we need. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis.
Thanks very much. I wanted to, I suppose, recognise and reflect Councillor Smith's comments. Obviously, there was some dissatisfaction with the process expressed by members of the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission. And so I have obviously been reflecting on the process and how we could have potentially improved things or done things better, made things more transparent. So, you know, one of my takeaways from this process, and, you know, not taking away from the fact that, you know, I'm assured, as I expressed at the beginning, that kind of proper process and everything has been followed, is how we can be a bit more transparent around the land transaction process. I think at the early stages, so as Councillor Smith expressed, I know they obviously felt that before we embarked on the marketing process that we should have taken something or a decision or taken some kind of update to the Scrutiny Commission. So I think I'm very keen to work with officers to take advice from Constitutional as well about how we can kind of at the early stages, if we are thinking about moving forward via the land transaction route, provide information in a timely and transparent way in public and to members of the Scrutiny Commission. So I just wanted to reflect that because that's obviously a kind of clear learning from the process as over the last year.
Can I just add to that? And I totally agree with what you said. Notwithstanding, I think it's important to add that, yes, there was a pre-scrutiny request made, but at that time we had no decisions to make because we had already bought Tower Bridge, and we at that point was deciding what to do next. So there was a process about reviewing the options that were available to us. So there was nothing really to scrutinize at that point. So we couldn't go to scrutiny. But I totally agree with what Helen said, but I think there's something else about how do we explain the process. I think it's very complex, as we've all found here, and not everyone will truly understand it, but it's how we take the time to explain it to the relevant parties.
I think that'd be very useful, and we'll probably deliberate on that a bit later. But I've got Councillor Johnson next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think I came into this meeting with some questions, and they've kind of been banked because of the conversation that's happened, and I've now gone down a slightly different route. And you've brought up the Tower Bridge care home, and given the way of the 199-year lease, it's got me thinking, how do we ensure that we are not potentially in a situation where we have to buy it back from Andover Care in 10, 15 years' time, because for whatever reason, they're unable to deliver them on this project. So as I think the appendix, the supplemental agenda said, it looks at about 25 to 30 million pounds to potentially deliver the building of a new care home, which we don't have. I understand that that's not an issue. I don't expect you to magic money out of coffers we don't have. So looking at Andover Care's accounts that I can see, I won't go into detail, they would obviously have to take out some kind of financial loan and mortgage to cover the cost of building on that site to develop this new care home. So if they follow the 50-50 model, 50% for our council home, our council residents, and then 50% beds that they will do through self-funded route. And looking at my understanding in Camberwell Lodge, which follows that model but doesn't currently fill its 50 beds with the self-funded residents, which would obviously be at a higher rate of pay, will probably cover a lot more of their overheads. There is potentially a risk, not that it will, but there is a risk that potentially in a few years' time, they may not be breaking even. And so therefore we'll be in a situation where they might want to sell that land or that space. Now, I would assume the lease we would have first right of refusal potentially over it. But what happens if we can't afford to buy it, another company is not involved in it, and then we potentially are at the risk where we stand to lose 90 beds, or we stand to lose a site of land for an indefinite period because it would get sold on to someone else who would then make an application to use it for alternative use. So I appreciate where we are now, but I don't necessarily feel that it is as future-proof as I would have hoped in terms of guaranteeing that this space be secured for people who we know are in that situation for an extended period of time.
No, thank you for that. I think very, very good points, actually. I mean, one thing we can't do is predict the future. So there will be uncertainty as we move forward, particularly if we go 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I think what we can give you reassurance about is that within the pink papers you have seen, but not the Commission, I'm not going to go into commercial details. You can see the commercial details of a transaction and the payments made under that commercial arrangement. So we are effectively getting a receipt for the land. We are granting a 99-year lease. The most important element of that 99-year lease is the use class. So we are protecting the use as a care home under the definition of a lease for those 99 years. Yes, you're absolutely right. Any commercial operator to fund the capital works required to build that home will probably take a charge out against the lease. So the lease has to be of an institutional standard to lend against it. And that's one of the important points. Otherwise, the provider wouldn't be able to raise finance to deliver a £25 million home. So there is a risk there. Absolutely honest. I'm not pretending otherwise. So in the eventuality that Andover Care go into receivership, effectively the creditors will have an asset there there to recover their financial loss. I think the due diligence we've done in terms of Andover Care themselves, we think that risk is very, very low. They're a robust organisation. We've checked their accounts. We've had those accounts looked at. And I think it comes back to their operating model as well. I think it's in both parties' interest for them to build a high quality home. Because I think, as you highlighted, they're expecting 50% of the beds to be sold in the marketplace. And those beds will not be attractive to the market unless the whole home is of a very high standard in both terms of provision and design, but also the care within that home as well. So hopefully it's in both parties' interest, the council and Andover, to deliver a high quality facility which is financially successful. I think when these things run into problems, I think, again, as you highlight, is when they run into financial difficulties. So there are some risks. I can't pretend there isn't a risk that they won't go bankrupt in the future, etc., etc. What I can say is that the use on that site is preserved, and they can't change that use without our permission.
Can I just add in terms of risk management, because I think you asked excellent questions. So in recent years, where we've seen care homes close, it's often been because the property is owned by one company and the care is provided by another. Sometimes the same people, but they've set up different companies and they're trading with themselves, and there's all sorts of investment models behind that. We've been worried about that for quite a while because, when there's a few people putting their money into a business venture and they're all about a certain age and they start to think about cashing in the chips and going and sitting on the beach, you then get, a market collapse. And Southern Cross is probably the most high profile example nationally, where, there was someone owning the building, someone providing the care, doing contracts with each other, and then they all just kind of wanted to cash in the chips. The company who used to own Tower Bridge had actually stepped into one of those models to rescue it, but they had a business plan to downsize. This company have a business plan to expand, and it is true that in terms of demand, actually, the reason why we had a council commitment in the first place to build another nursing care home was because we start from quite a low base. This borough has always been so young. We've got 10 times more schools in the borough than we have care homes. And when I speak to some of my desk colleagues from around London, they've got like so many more care homes in their boroughs. We look like, there's hardly anything. So we're starting from a very low base. Thankfully, older people are staying in the borough. They're choosing to stay in the borough and not move out. And it's great we have other facilities, Appleby Blue and others. But tragically, in terms of the forecast from the Institute of Public Care, so there's two forecasts that we use. One is called Poppy, one's called Pansy. And Poppy refers to older people and Pansy is people with disabilities. And the trajectory for both of those is very severe. And when you add into that mix dementia, we suddenly see a very different profile of a borough and we know, because of some of the difficult challenges we've had to face over schools, we're seeing fewer children in the borough, but we are seeing more older people in the borough. And actually, Southeast London is quite limited. And until you get to the very outskirts, is quite limited. So, of course, people coming to a care home in Southwark wouldn't just be from Southwark, they could be from Lambeth and Lewisham in particular as well. We get a lot more capacity in Bromley and Bexley, but for Greenwich, Lambeth, Lewisham and Southwark, overall the capacity is very light, and that's just the history of Southeast London and being a young patch, but that is changing. And so even on the conservative profiling from Poppy and Pansy, we're seeing a significant rise. So there definitely will be the need for this. And it's an interesting point as well about self-funders. So as we see people coming in social care, one of the challenges we have is we have to means test for social care, and we have to charge people for social care. I think most of us working in social care would like not to have to do that, just to put it out there. But that's the system that we have in England, where we means test and we charge. So we are seeing that for the council, it's fantastic that we own 5 care homes in the borough, and that's kind of a big stake in provision. But we also need to be making provision for people who will be self-funding. because they're getting older and they're needing somewhere to go. And at the moment, the cases that Pauline and I see for some of those people having to go out of borough are Southwark people who've lived here for many, many, many years. They're self-funding, but we haven't got enough self-funding options for people to stay in borough. So there's kind of two markets, the local government market and the private market, to be served, but right across the board, the demographics look pretty tough. And we're starting from a very low base. So I suppose I'm saying, councillors, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm back here in 5 years' time saying, latest data says we need another care home. You know, it's that kind of scale of need that you know, I hope goes some way to reassure you around the risk for the provider. Thanks.
Could I do a cheeky follow-up? Well, it's kind of two, sorry. So the first one is that you mentioned that you get some of them where they will have two companies who essentially they're owned by the same people and operate. So I suppose what protections do we have to ensure Andover Care Limited doesn't try to do that on this particular site and basically just cream as much money as they can if they try to change their model? And then the other point was, which I forgot to ask previously, was the current 10-year provision that's in place for the 50-50 arrangement. What happens at the end if they're like, actually, no, we don't want to do council beds anymore, we just want to do self-funded? How does that impact on that lease and the contract and stuff moving forwards?
So on the second point, in terms of the contract, as was mentioned actually in the call-in, we own 5 care homes. The council owns 5 care homes, and we have independent providers in them. They're mostly residential care, but with some nursing care. And it is our aspiration to increase nursing care in those care homes too, because that's where we see the pressure going forward, more in nursing care. And partly we'll have fewer residential care because of the flexi-care housing and the AMS houses that we have in the borough. So actually the care in those settings is not dissimilar to residential care. So we've got a lot more capacity in that space, which is great, but the pressure will be on nursing care. But the reason why we haven't been able to progress nursing care as fast as we would like in the 5 care homes is that they're full. We've got people in there at the moment with residential care, and we're not going to move them out just to replace them with someone for nursing care. So as each year goes by, we'll have more capacity overall. And the first port of call for that capacity is the council. So the people at the council place in those care homes. The NHS also need to place people in nursing care homes with continuing health care. So at the moment, they're also challenged to get capacity. So things will evolve over time in our own care homes, and in this care home. You get 10 years into the contract, we'll need some more, the NHS will need some more. The provider will then have a very clear view on what the demand is for the private self-funders. And we will seek to renegotiate another contract. But in worst case scenario, say the provider says, you know what, I don't like to look at you anymore, I can get more money out of people self-funding. That will still be capacity in the borough. And they would only do that if they're going to be able to fill those beds, because they would need us for any empty beds. And the profile going forward is that we will have some people with private funds who will need care. But the starting point for us today is that about little over 50% of people in care homes are council housing tenants. And at the moment, with paying for residential care, the big issue is, do you own your home? You know, until we see what reform comes down the lines, do you own your home? So as that plays through into the years, we're still a big player at the table. And what's attractive to providers, even if they can make a bit more money from self-funding, is steady income from the council and a constant flow of people. So it's better And in my experience over the years, providers will always want some business from the council because that's steady income. And actually, they know what they're getting. Everyone that comes from us is assessed. Everyone is eligible. They know the council can support them. They know the NHS can support them. Private persons, like someone, it's too crude to say like someone turning up at a hotel. Anyone can come. If you're an older person and you can pay for it, you can just go and say, I'd like to move in, and they can say yay or nay. But with us, they kind of know who they're getting, because we will have done a full assessment, and that actually makes for good partnership and good care. But I'm, not shying away from the fact that the money from the council is steady and regular income. So we're in quite a strong position, actually, to continue to negotiate new contracts.
Oh.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of words to give you a flavour of the profile of this, and hopefully that might reassure. This is a family business. I know that's an overused phrase, but it is genuinely a family business, intergenerational. So there's a real sense of wanting to have, well, they have a personal interface with the care homes, and I could give you various anecdotes around that, but you sense with them that they are looking to grow, but not to grow too big. They want a maximum of 5 units, 5 homes. They've got 2 homes at the minute. This would be their 3rd. They don't want to get bigger than 5 because they want to stabilize and have that closeness to the homes where they have a direct relationship with them. So that's very much the feeling of the quality side of the offer that we were getting, and it was manifest when we were walking around.
Okay, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you. And I actually had the same question, so I'm glad that one has been answered. I have 2 questions. One is on this rating, the CQC rating, that it looked like the 2019 had been the last assessment where it was outstanding, and then in July of 2025, that was reassessed. So I want to understand, how regularly do these CQC assessments take place, and was the process sufficiently far along by the time that assessment was downgraded? If you'd known that at the start, would anything have been different? And then I think, and I realise that I'm in a room full of experts on adult social care, but my understanding is, as I think you've just hinted at, David, that we've got obviously care homes and then we've got nursing homes, and they are different beasts. And thinking about the demand that the cabinet members talked about, and I think we're all aware of that in an ageing population, is one of the answers to this, kind of having more homes where people can stay in their homes and have that kind of care, so that they're not then in these particular homes. And to your point, and I think we're, well, I can't speak for everybody, all in agreement that we don't like profit being made off adult social care. It doesn't sit well with us, but we do want high quality care. So what is the role that can play, that we're kind of stemming that demand side of things, recognising that people with severe dementia and nursing needs do need to be in these kind of homes. And as I say, yeah, I did have a concern about if Andover goes out of business or sells us on, what kind of controls do we as a council have on that? Because that worries me gravely, because you said there's no money for us to take it back. So I think there's 3 questions in there that hopefully we can get answers to. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So I'll start, and then Pauline will come in as well. So in terms of the CQC inspections and ratings, CQC suspended inspections during the pandemic, and that explains the large long period of time where there were no inspections in the care homes. But whether a care home is rated good or outstanding would not change our view on doing business with them. Our policy is that we do business with people who have good or outstanding care homes. So, of course, we would like outstanding, and it's the aspiration that the cabinet member is very clear with me she has for our care. But it would not have changed the process whether they were good or outstanding. And between the reports, that's when the inspection happened. It's not as regular as councillors and residents might think in terms of inspections. The CQC also regulates the NHS. They also now regulate councils. We've just had our inspection fairly recently. We're waiting on the outcome of our CQC inspection. They're regulating an awful lot, and so we're not clear. Is that one? This. Okay. Great, thank you. So I can't give you a clear answer tonight on how frequently they would inspect this new care home or any others, because they set their own work. They set their own work plan each year, but I would recognise that councillors would wish to see regular inspections and regular monitoring. It is something Councillor Okoto has asked us to look at in terms of how we can strengthen our own monitoring of care homes in addition to CQC, because the pandemic had a huge impact, and it often can take years before a re-inspection happens, and that might feel to you, as it might feel to me, to be too long a period without a check. In terms of the care,
it was care versus nursing.
Yeah,
and
care,
thinking about this, it sounds like this is for nursing.
Yeah, this is for nursing, and it links back a little bit to the important point that was made about working with the NHS. So, when it comes to nursing care, the NHS are our best experts in providing nursing care. Where I live, our local nursing home is run by the NHS. So it's something I walk past, a few times a week. I walk past my local nursing home, and it is run by the NHS. So I have said to colleagues in the NHS and within the council for years, I would love to see an NHS nursing care home in the borough. And we did have some discussions with Guys and St Thomas's some years ago, and with some local charities who had buildings, about partnering. And at the time, Guys and St Thomas's said that they loved the idea of it, but they struggled to recruit enough nurses for the hospital. And they didn't want to overstretch themselves by also taking on a care home. But there were discussions between Guys and St Thomas's, a local charity who owned a building that would have made a great nursing care home, and the council. And sadly, despite all those best efforts, Guys and St Thomas's said, our focus is to recruit staff for the hospital, and if we try and run a care home as well, we're not sure we're going to be able to recruit. And then there were further discussions to see if an NHS provider would run a care home, and that also didn't come off for similar reasons. Guys and St Thomas's also did look for separate reasons, which was around hospital discharge. They did look to open a closed care home in the borough, Queen's Oak, closed, and Guys and St Thomas's looked to see if they could open it as extra capacity, because at that point, it was after the pandemic, there was a lot of pressure in the hospital. They thought they might need more capacity. They did a feasibility study, and put that back up to their board, and their board decided not to proceed with that, in part because by the time the work was done, the pressures were easing, and they felt that they'd rather invest the money, the capital that they had in the building, because hospitals are very expensive to maintain. So there's 3 separate occasions when the ideal of the NHS running a nursing care home were explored, and sadly didn't come to pass. But I'm still of the view the NHS are a great provider, and I'd love to see them, and I'm sad that hasn't happened. But I would also recognise that some providers like this, who don't overstretch themselves, can look after their staff really well, and can bring a homely as well as high quality nursing care to it, and that's what we found with them. Paul, is there anything you'd like to add on that, or the other aspect for Councillor Bentley?
So, sorry, I was just making notes of some things to add. Just for clarification, in terms of the CQC rating, it was just one of the domains, and that was around leadership. So it wasn't around care provision, and it wasn't around safeguarding. And the leadership element could be that staff felt unhappy about rotas, or it could be any number of things. And CQC have recognised that they haven't been going out and doing as many inspections as they had previously pre-pandemic. And certainly I went to a conference where CQC was presenting the report State of the Nation, and they were very much saying that they are recruiting to be able to do more inspections more timely, and to review the inspections. So you could find by the time, within a short space of time, the home that we're referring to goes back up to being outstanding. And it is quite, to have good is a very good scoring. It's like a B plus versus, an A plus really. And it is quite good. And to lose it just on one domain is not unusual, but again, it keeps the homes on their toes really as well. You were asking about what would we do, if in 10 years' time, if they didn't want, or if there was a change of provider, I think you were asking on this occasion, we would renegotiate with that new provider. We would work with them to try and get the best deal really for the council and for the residents who are going to be placed there. Because having had experience certainly of moving people from one home to another, it is just so difficult and is so disruptive. It takes up a huge amount of our staff time. It's very anxiety for both for the families in particular, and can be, you have got very frail people who are having to be moved by ambulance from one care home to another. So we will be doing everything that we can, if there was a change provider, to build a relationship with that provider and to negotiate with them to get the best standard of care. In terms of just mentioning again, going to visit the home and over all of the staff, nearly all the staff that were there were there from the very beginning. Very long-term staff were working with them, so that was quite reassuring. They also, in terms of the owners of the home, they were very hands-on. One of the directors was taking a minibus to collect people and bring them to different events. They had pets in the home. There was a lot of activities, a lot of care, and a lot of thoughtfulness, even in terms of where each resident's door looked like the front door of a house, so that people had that sort of feeling that this was their home, this was their property that they were entering into. I think I've covered everything. But just one more thing. We were talking about like the involvement of health. In one of the homes that we currently have, we have a reablement bed unit, which is very much has a lot of health input really into that, in terms of physios, nurses, and occupational therapists. And we work very closely with hospital in terms of where people need more time to recover from hospital. So they're discharged, you might say, quite early, and then they're supported to get back on their feet. That would be a model that we would look to replicate really in any home, in this home as well. We have a ratio of 30 nursing, 20 residential, and that allows for people to age in place, so they're not being shifted around. And it's different needs really to a degree for people with dementia. You often have more challenging behaviour, more disorientation. For nursing, it's very much about bed-based care. They are an extension of the hospital, so there is very close working with NHS staff.
Okay, we've been going for 2 hours now, so I don't want to prolong things, but just going back to the planning side of things, because mission care was mentioned, and what became obvious in discussions with officers, with the ward councillors over that particular planning application, was that there's no council policy on interiors for care homes that you can lay necessary conditions on. So I would hope that would be some deficiency that would be corrected in the near future, because obviously it's been raised here this evening, and I'm sure it's a concern of all members. It's not just the outward appearance and design, but it's very much the internal layout of these homes and the space that is given for individual residents, which it should be a care not just of the family and the organisation, but for the local authority too. Did you want to add something to that, Jason?
Just on that point that Ian rightly mentions, I think what the officers had, the design officer clearly outlined is that where exceptional design is necessary for residential homes, it's, as Ian says, not the case. There's no requirement in our council plan for that being the case for our care homes. And so I guess we're probably moving into recommendations, but it would be good to understand what work can be done, as Ian says, to ensure that we're able to get exceptional design that we ask for developers for residential homes as
Absolutely.
well as care homes.
And the next thing I was going to propose is we have a 5-minute break, and then we can come back and deliberate on recommendations. But if you wanted to say anything just now before we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the planning system works very similar to our system. So it's the appropriate policy at the time of decision which applies. So the policies we have to adhere to are our national policy, regional policy set by the GLA, and local policies set within our local plan. Our local plan is going through a process of renewal. We'll be starting off formally, redrafting the new Southwark plan. It only seems 2 minutes. The old plan was called the new Southwark plan. And we'll bring in a report to Cabinet early in the new year, setting out a programme for that. Certainly within our new Southwark plan, an area which I think the current plan is deficient in is around a provision for elderly residents. That's not just in care homes, that's more broadly and generally in terms of being an age-friendly borough. So as we develop that policy over the next 12-18 months, hopefully that policy will be applicable policy and will guide the decision of planning committee at that time. So I accept it is light on policy at the moment. It's something we do recognise and will be picking up through the development of our new plan over the next 18 months.
No, it's good to hear, but given what David said about the projections, it's something which is ought to be on our attention quite highly. Sorry, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to draw the committee's attention to the addendum, I think it was, to the Cabinet's report in October, where, again, thanks to the input, particularly Councillor Dobson, members of the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission, and reflecting on the discussions around Love Walk, we agreed as Cabinet to explore options for appointing the University of Stirling, which has a kind of specialist in dementia design, or potentially others, but they were the ones that had been recommended to us. So explore options for appointing them as a kind of design champion. I can't remember the exact words that we used, but we certainly want to try and take that element really seriously when moving forward with the design and the planning application on this project.
No, that's very comforting to hear, because I know it was raised. So in fact, Jason and myself were at a residents meeting in that neighbourhood yesterday evening, and that point was raised. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break so you can stretch your legs, and we'll come back for another 2 hours. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we can kick off again. Yeah, I just firstly wanted to thank everybody who spoke this evening. It's been very informative and a very interesting discussion, and also to thank members for their questions, because I think they were very apposite, and they touched on a load of issues but behind this particular topic. So thank everybody for that. Obviously, I'd like to draw some recommendations together so that we can send off to the Cabinet, depending on how members feel. So I'll just throw it open to members and see what comes forward. So I'll take Councillor Ottrey, then Councillor Seaton first.
Thanks. I think the information that's been provided today has been great, and I think it's clear that we're very ambitious in achieving the desperate need and demand for wider adult social care in this borough. And whilst I completely accept, yes, we ought to be doing things in-house, which would be desirable, I just think the conditions are as outlined have clearly considered why that would be difficult concerning the circumstances. That being said, I do think what the calling the councillors who have called this in have highlighted, and I think is very important, is the CQC ratings. Yes, albeit they've dropped in one standard, but I don't think we should be hell bent on pursuing our relationship with a partner independent of even future CQC ratings falling further down other categories. And so even in the case where it was to require improvement, it would seem very odd for us to still pursue a relationship with Andover. So I think what would be helpful as a recommendation is that where it falls in two or more categories from either outstanding or good, that there's a clear evidence of an improvement plan that is shared with not just the Health Scrutiny Commission, but also OSC, and if possible, Cabinet, as well as proof of an effective management system to mitigate themselves from those issues. And I think that helps us to keep a tiller on where things progressively get worse, which we're hoping it doesn't. But I think it provides us with reassurance that we're going with a partner that's holding itself to its higher standards as we do as a council, as being number one. I think secondly, on the point that I think Ian's referenced as regards to exceptional design in care homes, I think it would be good for us to have an update of some sort around the council plan and what's being proposed in relation to exceptional design in care home, and the kind of broader movement towards having a council plan that better reflects what we want for our residents, particularly when it comes to adult and social care. So I think if we could have an update up until the point that hopefully the council plan is released, hopefully those are two clear recommendations that hopefully others will accept.
Oh, so.
You're timing me.
Oh, he was always on time. Councillor Seaton next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I have been quiet this evening. You've been really informative. And I want to congratulate all colleagues who've spoken and responded to our questions. It is clear that the need for us to rethink the borough, it 10 years ago, we were considered to be a youngish borough. We are no longer, and clearly not, a youngish borough. And that will have significant impact on both us as a council, how we resource that change, and indeed how the private sector responds to our need for new care and indeed nursing homes. So I want to just acknowledge that, and I want to thank those who brought in the call in, because obviously they're very sensitive to the opinions of residents. And I didn't ask the question earlier, Chair, but I would have asked the question if I had earlier on with respect to human rights and of course consultation. So consultation wasn't elaborated at this meeting thus far. Maybe colleagues might want to talk about how these decisions are being consulted on, who all are the key stakeholders, and what were their responses. I've not seen in the papers any formal response from other stakeholders, but it'd be useful to understand what their opinions might have been. And secondly, based upon the questions and responses to questions, and it was hinted at, of course, the distinction between care and nursing homes, relationship between ourselves and NHS, but if I may, as elected representatives, the equalities implications that might have. I'm not sure it was sufficiently elaborated here as to what are the equality implications. It would be useful to understand that, if possible, as early as possible in the process, not once we're in the middle of the process. I suspect it will be quite profound, and I had a meeting only last night with members of a church and a mosque discussing the changing profile of their congregations. Okay. And it is no doubt that in case of my own children, they're moving out, and they are now having to change their religious sessions in order to accommodate a different profile. And if that's happening at this very basic level, I would imagine that the community will have a view on this. And I really would like to hear what the view of that community is, particularly our diverse communities, will be on us providing and ensuring that in our later age, and some argue that I'm approaching those later ages, that there is sufficient. Don't you be laughing, Mr. Chair. That there is sufficient.
You're always a young man to be laughing.
Long may it continue that way. And my last point, Chair, have to do with the and it's interesting to listen to the chair of the Health and Social Care Scrutiny, of course, that in the response to my only question, which was, well, why were not these questions addressed at that committee? So that does highlight an interesting point, because it may not have been necessary if the Scrutiny Committee had had the opportunity either to follow up on the original meeting, and I'm not sure it was possible, but nevertheless, or there is a means by which the chairs are briefed by cabinet members on the changes, substantive or material changes to the evidence submitted in April. Because clearly the question posed at that time were based upon the evidence provided, but if there was significant material change to that report, it's quite right that either the chairs are briefed by cabinet members, or a mechanism is set up with directors to ensure that the committee is informed of those material changes. I think that's a profound issue, which is caused, or they've got now, of course, which has resulted in this call-in. And this call-in has been a constructive process. It's been very cordial and so on. So we're all on the same page, but it most probably would not have been necessary if there's a mechanism in place to take note of the material changes to the evidence submitted in April. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Von Wiese next, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I second Councillor Seaton's remark with regards to transparency and information. I'm satisfied from what the officers said, very eloquently said about service provision. I still have these lingering doubts about the process, because what we have here is provision to some of the most vulnerable residents in the borough. And this is about control. It's about control by us, the elected members of this authority, but also by the authority itself, with the public sector outlook, not by private sector provisions. It's not the United States, luckily, and it is that control over ultimately the quality of service that I'm slightly worried about when we outsource in general, and how we outsource and how we can ensure that over time. So I would also recommend that, in particular, it becomes very clear going forward that sufficient information is provided to the cabinet as and when they make the decision, that that information is updated on time, and that we are very, very careful when we consider alternatives to the usual public procurement system as opposed to alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bentley.
Echoing everything that everyone else has said, this has been, I think, really helpful, and I think we've worked, collectively to kind of really shine a light on this, which I think has been great. Something that struck me is that this straddles two portfolios, and I think it's clear that the Health and Social Care Committee tried to scrutinise this and brought it forward. And I think a lot of our focus accordingly this evening has been on that angle. But obviously there is the aspect of the homes and the housing part of it that I don't think we've really dug into. And it is about providing a roof over the head for, as my colleague said, the most vulnerable. And I think there's something in there about, who bears ultimate responsibility. Catherine spoke very clearly about how you'd worked well with your colleagues to make sure, because I don't think this is typically your portfolio, so you were working with Pauline, and I think it was Claire, to make sure you understood the adult social care aspect of that. But I'm wondering if maybe that's where some of the discomfort has come in this, in that it straddles the two portfolios. So I think there's something there about who should be leading on these kind of projects going forward.
It's a perennial issue in my experience of where you draw the line between various portfolios. But anyway, yeah, I'd like to sort of just go back on that sort of constitutional point. I mean, really, a commission shouldn't really have to come before OSC, to be perfectly frank. We need to have a system where, at the moment, there isn't a sort of second bite to the cherry when it comes to commissions looking at cabinet proposals. So I think that's something that we need to take away as an authority and look at that to make scrutiny run a bit more smoothly. Okay, is there any other members wanting to say anything? Okay, so Amit, you took a note of? Yeah.
6.
Okay, do you want to read it out, and then we can sort of?
Chair, I haven't really worded.
No, just read it as it is, and then we can knock it together.
Okay, not a problem. So the first one was on CQC ratings, fall in 2 or more categories in areas of outstanding or good, and where it shows a need for improvement, and we need an effective management system. The second one is exceptional design in care homes, updates to OSC, and that the plans reflect this. The third one was human rights and consultation. The responses from key stakeholders, equalities implications in nursing home and care homes. The fourth one was the follow-up and briefing by cabinet members to the Health and Social Care Scrutiny Commission. The fifth one was transparency and information, service provision, process and control over the quality of service, outsourced services over time. Sufficient information is provided to cabinet in time, and to champion the use of public procurement systems rather than alternatives. The last one was excuse me, homes and housing aspects in adult social care and the areas of the two portfolios that have an overlap. That was the last one.
I think what we'll do is we'll get Amit to write it up, and we'll circulate it to members, but we'll knock it together so it reads a little more smoothly, if I could put it that way. And then you can all respond by email if that's okay. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you all again.
Chair,
sorry, hold on. We don't get away that easily.
I need to take you back to the original thing that Everton said, that there are 3 alternatives. You have
Right.
to decide which one of the three. Are you going to refer it back to?
Yes, well, no, we're not referring the decision back. We're referring recommendations based on the decision.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Wait, everything's coming forward now.
Sorry, Chair. Just for clarification, the decision is currently held in abeyance pending the outcome of scrutiny consideration. The recommendations you're putting forward are recommendations for Cabinet to consider and decide whether or not to agree. As Norman's just mentioned, in terms of the actual call-in, if you're not referring the decision back to Cabinet, then the decision can be implemented straight away.
Yes.
If you are referring it back, then we'll need to hold a special meeting of Cabinet.
I don't think we're referring it back. We're making recommendations based on the discussion this evening, because I don't think I heard any grounds for referring it back, because it's in line with council policy. It was the procedural aspects that was the reason for the call-in.
Okay, so you're happy for the decision to be implemented?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarification. Cheers.
Thank you. Right, so that finishes that. I know the work plan's on here, but it shouldn't be on here because this is a call-in and not a full OS committee, so that can wait for next time. So thank you all for coming, and good night.